Hello, let's talk about book. Today we're gonna be discussing another book entitled Introducing Functional Grammar by Jeff Thompson. This is one of my favorite books that I usually use in my introduction to functional grammar class. And I highly recommend this book for English teachers, language researchers, or linguists who are interested in analyzing language through the lens of functional linguistics or functional grammar. For most people who do not study linguistics in an extensive way, the term systemic functional linguistics might be quite new and they might not be familiar with the term because it's actually a very specific term that is quite widely used in the field of linguistics and a new trend in grammar which goes beyond the structures. So as you know, in the past we have traditional linguistics or traditional way of seeing grammar where grammar is seen or was seen as a way of formalizing rules or structures, and that's why we tended to focus on the forms, on the structural forms of clauses, sentences, and of the language. And functional grammar provides an alternative explanation to language, and it sees language as a set of options. And by options, I mean when we communicate through language, we choose the types of structures, we choose the formulation of sentences, we choose even the tones, the suprasegmental features of the utterance that we are speaking. So our choice in the language that we use indicates our intention, indicates our ideology, and even indicates our belief. So that is something that is offered by systemic functional grammar or systemic functional linguistics. And this book, I think, is a very simple yet comprehensive book for newbies in the field of systemic functional linguistics. So if you're looking for an easy book, an introductory book that can help you to sort of understand the basic concepts or the basic ideas of functional linguistics or functional grammar, then I would suggest you to read this book, Introducing Functional Grammar by Jeff Thompson. And this book is separated into some parts. At the beginning, you're gonna be given some ideas about the orientations of linguistic analysis, and in that beginning part, we are provided with the objectives or the goals that we set to achieve through linguistic analysis. And then in the next chapter, Jeff Thompson starts to break down the systemic functional linguistics or systemic functional grammar into some parts. And this book was actually written by adopting the notion of functional grammar or functional linguistics proposed by Halliday. He's actually the proponent of systemic functional linguistics. He was the pioneer of this field of study, and thus Jeff Thompson tried to restate Halliday's ideas in a simpler way, and that's why he wrote this book. And according to the systemic functional linguistics, in Halliday's view, and also of course Jeff Thompson's view, language can be defined into a set of meta-functions. Meta-functions are the fundamental functions of languages. So there are three meta-functions that are usually scrutinized in systemic functional linguistics, and they are experiential meta-function, or some people call it ideational meta-function, and then the second one is interpersonal meta-function, and the third one is textual meta-function. Now, I know that they're new to most of you who did not study linguistics. So, what are those meta-functions? Now, experiential or ideational meta-function is the function of language that helps us, the users of the language, to sort of experience things, physical things and also abstract things. So we experience things through language, and even we use language to conceptualize new ideas. You may imagine words, for example. We invent words, human beings, we invent words to understand the concepts of world, the reality, so that we can communicate. And that's the function of the language, right? We have arbitrary words like, for example, table. When I say the word table, you would imagine the thing, right, in your mind, because we have that reality, we have that concept of reality of the thing called table. When we experience when we see a table, for example, and then we have the word table, we use the word to sort of understand that reality, right? We use the word table to understand the thing that is called table. So that is the function of language that helps us to experience reality. And we may also talk about abstract thing like love, for example. The word love is an arbitrary word that is used to conceptualize the abstract thing, that feeling called love. We cannot see, we cannot perceive love. Love is an abstract thing, right? Only through the word love, only through language, we can understand the concept of that abstract thing. So language enables us to experience the reality, both physical reality and abstract reality. That is the experiential or ideational metafunction of language. And then the second metafunction is interpersonal function. Interpersonal function or interpersonal metafunction is the function of language that helps us to build relationships with other people, right? Because we are social creatures after all. So human beings need to communicate with other human beings. And through language, it is possible, right? When we understand the language of a person, we would be able to communicate with him or her, right? So that is the function of language, the interpersonal function of language, to help us build relationships with other human beings. And you might think of when you're asking for help from another person, with language, it's gonna be easier for you to express your intention, right? To ask for help from that person. You can imagine if we don't have any language, it's gonna be so difficult for us. It's gonna be nearly impossible for us to ask for help from other people. But with language, we can do it very easily. So that's the function of language, the interpersonal function of language. And then the third one we have textual metafunction or textual function of language. What is textual function? Textual function is actually the function of language that helps us to encode our messages into text or into the form of text that we use to communicate. The textual function of a language is the function of encoding our messages into a certain type or a certain form of language that is effective to deliver the meaning to other person. So it's actually cultural and social as well. That is textual. The knowledge, the function about about text, how we organize messages in our language, that is textual function of language in the systemic functional grammar. Okay, so those are the three meta functions. And in functional grammar, there are several concepts or several frameworks of analysis that we can use to analyze each of those functions, each of those meta functions. So, for example, for the experiential or the ideational function, there is the so-called transitivity. So, transitivity is very peculiar. It's very specific to functional grammar. So through transitivity, we would be able to classify words or units in a clause into several constituents. In transitivity, we have participants, for example, yeah, and then we have another terms like processes and also circumstances. So those are the three types of constituents that we have, the three types of groups of words that we have to sort of classify them into several categories. And by classifying words, phrases into several categories, we are able to perceive how the words or the phrases are used in a clause in accordance with the function or the intention of the speaker or the writer. So transitivity is a way in functional grammar to analyze the ideational or the experiential metafunction. And then the interpersonal metafunction. In functional grammar, we have the so-called mood and modality. Mood and modality are also frameworks of analysis that we use to perceive our intention in relations to our interlocutors. So when we are communicating through languages, usually we'll use different types of mood and modality, and the mood and modality usually convey our messages in accordance with our intention, in accordance with the functions of the language as our tool to communicate with other people. So mood and modality are used to analyze the interpersonal metafunction. And then lastly, we have textual metafunction. Textual metafunction is usually analyzed through theme and rhyme, or some people call it thematic analysis. So thematic analysis is the way we organize messages in our text based on the so-called theme and rhyme. So theme is the central focus of our message, while rhyme is usually in the new information about the theme. I'm gonna explain that more in other videos probably, because I think it's gonna take much more time to discuss the concept of theme and rhyme and also the other concepts that we have in functional grammar. So yeah, that is a brief summary about the concepts that are scrutinized in this book. And again, I'd say that this book is quite simple yet comprehensive, and I do recommend this for those who would like to understand grammar or linguistics in a functional way. So, for linguists, for language teachers, and maybe for, language enthusiasts, or even those who research communication, those who are dealing with communication studies. If you want to understand how language is used based on certain functions, and perhaps if you want to analyze language critically, then functional grammar might be an alternative for you to understand it, to understand the concept. And if you want to understand about functional grammar, this book, I think, is one of the most easy to understand book that's available there. So, is this book worth reading? You decide.